The entire town gathered beneath the old oak tree. Two innocent brides stood in silence, their heads lowered in shame. One by one, every man stepped back after hearing the same heartbreaking words. They can never have children. The whispers spread like wildfire. No family, no future, no husband would ever choose them. Just as the sisters believed their lives were over, a lonely rancher rode through the crowd. He looked at both women, then calmly dismounted his horse. Everyone expected him to leave like the others. Instead, he smiled and said something that stunned the entire town. "I wasn't looking for children. I was praying for people to love." That single sentence changed three lonely lives forever. Stay until the very end, because this unforgettable Wild West story proves that the strongest families aren't always built by blood. They're built by kindness, sacrifice, and unconditional love. If you love emotional Wild West stories filled with hope, compassion, and second chances, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and join us for more inspiring adventures. The town square of Red Eye was unusually crowded beneath the sprawling branches of the old oak tree. Ranchers, merchants, blacksmiths, and travelers gathered in tense silence, whispering as two young women stood side by side in the center of the square. Their names were Clara and Grace Bennett, sisters who had traveled west hoping to begin new lives as mail-order brides. Both wore simple dark blue prairie dresses, their hands tightly clasped together as they faced the curious crowd. Only hours earlier, two hopeful engagements had been arranged. But before the ceremonies could begin, an elderly doctor mentioned a painful truth he had discovered while treating the sisters during their journey. Neither Clara nor Grace could bear children. The news spread through the town faster than wildfire. One by one, the men who had eagerly planned to marry them quietly stepped away. Some avoided eye contact, others openly shook their heads. A few cruel voices declared that a ranch needed heirs, not wives who could never become mothers. Every rejection felt heavier than the last. Clara tried to remain strong, but tears slowly filled her eyes. Grace squeezed her sister's trembling hand, refusing to let her stand alone through the humiliation. They had already lost their parents years before and had survived hardship together. Now they believed they had lost their final chance at finding a home. As the whispers grew louder, silence suddenly fell across the square. The steady sound of horse hooves echoed through the dusty street as a lone rider approached. Rancher Daniel Harper guided his black horse into the center of the crowd before calmly climbing to the ground. Daniel lived alone several miles outside town, known as a hardworking but quiet man whose kindness often went unnoticed because he rarely spoke more than necessary. Years earlier, he had lost the woman he loved to a deadly fever before they could marry. Since then, loneliness had become his constant companion. He had spent years believing his ranch would always remain empty. Looking at the frightened sisters, Daniel saw something the others refused to see. He didn't see women who couldn't have children. He saw two people whose hearts had just been broken in front of an entire town. One rancher laughed nervously and warned him, "You know they can never give you a family." Daniel looked at the man without anger before quietly replying, "A family isn't measured by who shares your blood. It's measured by who shares your heart." The crowd fell silent. Daniel turned toward Clara and Grace, removed his hat respectfully, and spoke with gentle sincerity. "If you've nowhere left to go, my ranch has room for both of you." The sisters stared at him in disbelief. They expected pity. They expected another rejection disguised as kindness. Instead, this stranger offered dignity without asking for anything in return. Grace whispered, "People will laugh at you." Daniel smiled softly. "I've spent enough years worrying about empty rooms. I'd rather fill them with good people than spend another day listening to bad opinions." Tears streamed down Clara's face as hope slowly replaced despair. Together, the sisters climbed into Daniel's wagon while the stunned townspeople watched in complete silence. As they rolled away from Red Eye beneath the golden evening sky, none of the three lonely souls realized they were beginning a journey that would challenge every belief the town held about love, family, and happiness. The same people who mocked them that afternoon would one day look toward Daniel's ranch with admiration. wondering how three broken hearts had built one of the happiest homes in the entire frontier. Life at Daniel Harper's ranch began quietly. Clara and Grace expected to stay only long enough to earn enough money to move on, but Daniel never treated them like burdens or strangers. He simply handed them a key to the farmhouse and said, "This house has been lonely for too many years. It's time someone filled it with laughter again." Every morning, the three worked side by side. Daniel repaired fences and cared for the horses, while Clara transformed the empty house into a warm home with fresh bread, flowers, and cheerful music. Grace tended the vegetable garden, cared for the chickens, and planted fruit trees around the property, saying she wanted future generations to enjoy their shade, even if those children were never her own. Slowly, the cold silence that had filled the ranch since Daniel's loss disappeared. Evenings were spent around the fireplace sharing stories, laughing over simple meals, and discovering that the happiest homes are often built by people who choose one another, not by those simply connected through blood. Meanwhile, rumors spread quickly through Red Eye. Some townsfolk mocked Daniel, claiming he had made the biggest mistake of his life by welcoming two childless brides into his home. Others predicted the unusual arrangement would fall apart within weeks. Daniel ignored every cruel word. He cared far more about the peace inside his home than the opinions outside it. Months passed, and something remarkable began to happen. The Harper Ranch became known as the kindest place in the valley. Hungry travelers never left without a hot meal. Orphan children found warm clothes during winter. Widows received firewood without ever asking. Clara and Grace treated every visitor like family, while Daniel quietly helped anyone facing hardship. Before long, the same neighbors who had once laughed found themselves knocking on the ranch door whenever they needed help. One evening, as the three watched the sunset from the porch, Grace softly asked Daniel why he had chosen them when everyone else had walked away. Daniel smiled gently before answering, "Because I wasn't searching for someone to carry my name. I was searching for people who would fill this home with love." Clara wiped away a tear as she realized that the family they thought they would never have had already begun to grow in ways none of them had ever imagined. Soon, the entire town would learn that the greatest legacy a person can leave behind is not children alone, but a life filled with kindness, compassion, and hearts forever changed. A year later, the people of Red Eye barely recognized the ranch they had once mocked. Where loneliness had once lived, laughter now echoed across the fields. Clara's flower gardens bloomed around the farmhouse. Grace's orchard stretched across the hillside, and Daniel's ranch had become a place where every traveler knew they would find kindness instead of judgment. Children from neighboring ranches spent afternoons playing beneath the giant oak trees. Widows gathered for Sunday meals, and weary cowboys often stopped by simply to enjoy the warmth of the welcoming home. Though Daniel, Clara, and Grace never had children of their own, they became the family everyone else depended upon. They took in orphaned youngsters during harsh winters, gave hungry strangers honest work, and offered comfort to anyone carrying heartbreak. Before long, people stopped calling Clara and Grace the childless brides. Instead, they became known as the two women whose kindness had touched more lives than anyone could count. Even the men who had once rejected them quietly admitted they had been terribly wrong. One afternoon, the town's elderly preacher visited the ranch and smiled as children laughed across the yard. Looking at Daniel, he said, "You wanted a family, and God gave you one larger than you ever imagined." Daniel looked across the porch at Clara and Grace, who were helping several orphan children decorate homemade kites, and quietly replied, "Love always grows bigger than fear." The years later, travelers passing through Red Eye still heard the remarkable story of the lonely rancher who welcomed two rejected brides when no one else would. Their home became a symbol of hope throughout the frontier, proving that a family is never defined by blood alone, but by compassion, loyalty, and the courage to love without conditions. Every spring, the townspeople gathered at the Harper Ranch for a community picnic beneath the same kind of oak tree, where Clara and Grace had once stood in shame. Daniel often smiled as he watched dozens of children running across the fields, knowing that although none carried his name, Every one of them had found encouragement, kindness, or shelter because someone had chosen love over judgment. Clara carefully kept the faded handkerchief she had carried on the day of her public rejection, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof that the darkest moments can lead to life's greatest blessings. Grace often told young couples, never measure a home by the number of children inside it. Measure it by the amount of love that fills every room. Their story became one of the most cherished legends in the frontier, inspiring countless people to open their hearts to those the world had forgotten. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who believes that true family is built through kindness, not blood. Remember, the greatest legacy we leave behind isn't found in our name. It's found in the lives we choose to love.